Hi, I'm Jim Gordon and you're watching Market 1 Minute. Joining us is Mitchell Demeter of SonicStrategy Inc. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, lots of notes, lots of questions, lots to unpack. Let's start, Mitchell, big picture. Tell our viewers a bit about SonicStrategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So SonicStrategy is a digital asset treasury company focused on the Sonic blockchain and the Sonic ecosystem.
And why should investors pay attention to Sonic blockchain specifically? It's very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we've been involved in the space for a long time. I got involved in the space back in 2013 myself. And so I've kind of watched the evolution of these blockchains from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Solana. And Sonic is something that caught my eye a few years back. Basically we've got a ton of different blockchains right now. We firmly believe that the future of finance is going to be built on a blockchain, and we need a blockchain that can scale up and handle the transaction throughput of the whole basically digital world. And that's why we've identified Sonic and Sonic blockchain. And so basically when you think about Ethereum blockchain can handle between 15 to 20 transactions per second, whereas with Sonic, it can handle up to 400,000 transactions a second.
I just want to sidetrack here for a second. When you mentioned that to me earlier, you do about 400,000 transactions per second with sub-second finality. You're talking about confidence about wanting to say you feel you could dominate this market, but also why is this kind of transaction so important in terms of what it could mean for the future of finance? Yeah,
absolutely. So one thing that I just caught there, I want to make sure that the listeners or viewers know that we're not actually the company that's building the blockchain.
Sure.
We're a public company that's focused on providing exposure to this blockchain. And it's just a blockchain that we like. We've been working closely with the team. But back to the question, why the transaction throughput and time to finality matters. When you start to run, global financial infrastructure applications on top of a blockchain, it's really important that they can move quickly, they can move cheaply, and the time to finality is important because in the financial world, when seconds matter, when there's transactions and the throughput matters, and I'm buying something from you and maybe you're selling it to somebody else, you need to know that those transactions are finalized instantly and that the transactions can't be reversed after.
And Mitchell, for our viewers that may not be technically deep or deeply technical, I would certainly put myself in that category. Talk about Sonic's processing speed and why you believe it matters for the future of finance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that differentiation that I was making, essentially what we do is we kind of act as a proxy for investors that are looking to get exposure to these early and up and coming blockchains. And so, back to the throughput, Ethereum was the first one to kind of build out these decentralized blockchains, built for decentralized finance. They're kind of like dial-up internet, where it's slow, it's antiquated, it's expensive, and with Sonic, it's fast. It's basically like fiber internet. And then as far as us as a company, rather than an investor having to go out and find a digital asset exchange that they can buy this asset from, figure out how to secure it properly with seed words or two-factor authentication, worry about the whole custody side of it and tax reporting. With us, they can buy our stock on the Canadian or on the US markets. We take care of custody, we take care of acquiring the underlying assets, we take care of earning yield on the assets. And it's all done through the investor's traditional brokerage account.
Let's talk about your three-pillar or three-step approach. One of the things I see consistent with you and Sonic is the phrase long-term planning and long-term thinking. With your three-step, you're taking a long-term approach with the S token and in regards to the token's utility. So again, I think that's important to say that we're not looking to be here and make rich and then we're gone tomorrow. You're thinking long-term, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And even today, a lot of the assets that people are familiar with, these have been building for a long time. Right. Bitcoin, Ethereum, these aren't things that have kind of just popped up recently. And that's the approach that we're taking. We're long-term. Fundamentally, we believe that this is the infrastructure and the blockchain that the future is going to be built on. And while the market has kind of its cycles, its ebbs and flows, and we do anticipate that we are coming into a stage in the market cycle that there will be lots of upside potential in the short term. We think that long term, this is where a lot of the the world will be transacting. And so, we're here for that longer, 10, 15-year timeline.
Are there people, and again, going back to the investors, we were talking again off camera about there are people out there that may feel that they have, for lack of a better phrase, missed the boat. What do you say to those investors?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even like the dial-up internet comparison, where there's iterations and there will continue to be iterations of blockchain. And, a lot of the blockchains that have had massive increases over the last few years, they're still getting a lot of attention, but every day there's new blockchains that are coming online and that are innovating, and that's why we like the Sonic blockchain. Right. Based on what we've seen, they're faster, they're cheaper, and they can basically they're built for kind of this next generation. They've taken what's been built in the past, where people have kind of have had a lot of success investing in these ecosystems, but they've improved it, and we see a lot of growth happening on chain. And then, for investors that want exposure to these types of assets through their traditional accounts, that's what we're doing that's unique here. This blockchain is still trading at in around $1 billion market cap. Often, when there's an ETF has been created, like we have for Bitcoin and for Ethereum, this is happening at a scale or a stage when the blockchain is much more established, sitting in multi-$100 billion market caps, or even $1 trillion market cap, kind of in the case of Bitcoin. We're seeing a lot of these other proxy companies pop up with other blockchains like Solana. But again, this blockchain was sitting at a $100 billion market cap before this happened. With Sonic, right now it's sitting at $1 billion market cap, and that's where we see, we can give investors exposure to an asset like this through a traditional brokerage account. They don't need to go and sign up for, cryptocurrency exchanges to get exposure. They can call their broker, and the upside still hasn't, the upside is still yet to come.
Let's talk growth potential versus portfolio stability.
Yeah, so as far as the growth potential, like I said, this is still an early stage blockchain. The growth that they've been experiencing has been massive. They were one of the fastest blockchains to reach over $1 billion in value locked on their chain. It happened in 106 days, which is very quick. They've rebuilt, a bunch of the incentive structures for blockchains, which has been bringing in a lot of developers, which obviously bring the users. Part of what they've done differently is they've built it so that 90% of the fees that a developer generates through their application actually goes back to the developer. So that's more in line with like the YouTube business model, where the content creators get to bring get a share of those fees they're generating from the engagement. They've also built it out so that users can sign up for an account without recording seed words. So they'll be able to log in with kind of their email or their Gmail account. Yeah. So a lot more user friendly, kind of removing some of the clunkiness that we've seen with crypto up to this point. Which I think these are needed innovations to kind of onboard the average person.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've talked about this many times, but innovation, technology advances rapidly. But also, what do you say to the investors that say, I want to dip my toe in, but I'm a little frightened by the safety and let's say lack of regulation? What do you say to them?
Yeah, overall, the space has become much more regulated. When I got involved back in the space back in 2013, yeah, there was essentially no regulation.
Wild West kind of thing.
And nobody knew what we were talking about. Yeah. More recently, I built an exchange in Canada called Netcoins, and we worked with the regulators. And even through that process, through kind of 2017, 2018, the regulators were really just starting to learn about it. Now, we've gotten to a point where there's a clear regulatory framework for exchanges and the way that these businesses kind of can onboard users and how things need to be handled. But even more so, the administration that's currently in the White House in the U.S., they've made it clear that they want to bring a lot of this blockchain innovation back home. The other beautiful thing about a company like ours is that you're working within the traditional finance market, which is a regulatory regime that most people are familiar with. Yeah. And then we kind of go and we work with the new regulatory environment to acquire these assets, secure them in a way that's that meets the requirements of the traditional finance markets for best pricing and custody, security, all that type of stuff. Fully regulated and audited. But we're kind of merging those two worlds between this up and coming Web3 world and the traditional finance world.
Excellent. Okay. You guys have been busy. You've had a lot of updates on your website for investors. A number of highlights. One I wanted to start with is, let's talk about the U.S. listing. How big is that? Yeah,
for us, it's massive. Obviously, we're from Canada and we're familiar with this environment here, and we've enjoyed this, and it's a great place to start, and we will remain a Canadian listed issuer.
Right.
But getting access to the U.S. market is massive for us. It's obviously a lot bigger for us, and can kind of open up a lot of opportunities for us to kind of grow our shareholder base.
That's great news. Congratulations. Before I let you go, anything else that's got you excited looking forward?
Yeah, overall, right now we're at a kind of stage in the market cycle where Bitcoin has been moving. We're breaking all-time highs recently with Bitcoin. Ethereum is coming back up. We're seeing a lot of growth there. And this is kind of a common market cycle that we see where capital starts to kind of flow into Bitcoin and kind of the blue chips first. And then as the cycle continues, more and more capital comes into some more of these up and coming blockchains. And we think that that part of the cycle is coming, and that's why we've been getting in position on Sonic right now. And we're expecting a lot of exciting times to come.
Where can people find out more information? What is your website?
Yeah, our website is sonicstrategy.io, and they can also follow us on Twitter or X. X
yeah.
Has SonicStrategy. And on our website we've got our investor deck, and you can contact investor relations through there as well.
It has been a great pleasure talking to you, Mitchell. Thank you for the education, and thank you for providing potential investors and your investors more information on what you guys are doing. Mitchell Demeter, thanks for joining.
Appreciate the time.
Hi, I'm Jim Gordon. Thanks for watching this Market 1 Minute on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with other videos that we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click on this list to see other great videos from Market 1. And thank you again for watching.